in the recent horrific shootings, particularly the ones that we had just a few weeks ago in that awful weekend in El Paso and Dayton, both of those criminals passed background checks. Now, I'm not saying that means we don't have background checks.
No.
I think we should have them.
I'm not saying that means we don't have background checks. No. I think we should have them.
But the idea that it's a panacea or that it's a silver bullet.
But wait, hold on a second.
Steve.
The second weapon.
Hold on. Anna, just one simple point.
Yes.
What happened in Odessa when the guy got dinged on the background check was he exercised the loophole and he bought it privately. And that's why we're saying all commercial transactions should be checked, and then he wouldn't have slipped through.
All commercial transactions should be checked.
If you have to ask for permission to exercise a right, you are not a free man. Free men don't ask for permission. A couple days ago, the Counterfeit News Network put out another propaganda video. I know, shocker, right? It was entitled, "Trump Administration Moves to Ban Flavored E-Cigarettes." But somehow it quickly devolved into another drum-banging session to throw more fuel on and empower the gun control desires of leftist control freaks. Before we dive into this cesspool of a video, the best way you can support this channel is by hitting the like button and sharing it with everybody you know. That's about the only way channels like this can survive the onslaught of YouTube's suppression and censorship algorithms. And if you feel like it's worth supporting independent, objective media like this, the PayPal, Patreon, and Bitcoin links are in the description as well. But liking and sharing goes a long way in helping the channel grow. So let's get into this video.
So the Trump administration is now moving to ban flavored e-cigarettes. Why? Concern for children.
They're coming home and they're saying, "Mom, I want a vape." And the parents don't know too much about it, and nobody knows too much about it, but they do know it's causing a lot of problems. And we're going to have to do something about it. People are dying with vaping.
Now, we can expect legal pushback from the companies. We've been through this before, but here's the debatable question for us tonight. The premise for action. You heard this, President. People are dying. At least 6 people have died from lung illnesses linked to vaping. Hundreds more are sick. But if the president is so concerned about something that's potentially lethal to kids, and that seems like it's a danger, why doesn't that rationale apply to gun violence?
Here we go again. Using euphemisms to control people by the hand of government through the incessant propagandizing of topics by corporate media. Gun violence, ban vaping, ban certain kinds of weapons. These are all euphemistic catchphrases to arrest and control the minds of the masses. Guns don't kill people. Therefore, guns are not the problem. People choose to vape or smoke or take drugs or whatever. It's the action of a person that leads to all these deaths. People are responsible for people dying, not inanimate objects. Such simple concepts and yet so convoluted by mainstream media.
That's the start of tonight's great debate. We have Anna Kasparian and we have Steve Cortez. Good to have you both. Anna, first, if you agree with that premise that it should apply to gun violence, why?
Well, I think that it makes sense to legalize and regulate things. So I am not against getting rid of or banning all guns, but it makes sense to regulate, have common sense regulation for guns. The same goes for substances.
By that sentence, Anna just let you know that she's a control freak. And while she may never directly try to control you through violent means herself, she has no trouble calling for that violent oppression to come upon you by the evil third party called government, should she determine that you possess a personal protection device or firearm that she doesn't want you to have. Any person who thinks another person should be controlled or regulated by another against that person's will is evil. Let's just call it like it is.
banning substances has not worked out so well for Americans or American history. We have imprisoned so many nonviolent drug offenders in our so-called drug war, and at the same time, after we've wasted so much in government resources in doing so, we created a black market. And so people are going to turn to an unregulated black market where these drugs, and in this case, the e-cigarettes, are much more dangerous.
Well, isn't the same thing with guns? That if you were to start really restricting access, you'd create a secondary market where certainly the bad guys would go.
Of course it's the same thing for guns. That's where Kasparian and CNN and all the gun grabbers can't escape the vortex of their own inconsistency, immorality, and desire to control people who don't want to be controlled. But Anna downplays this by saying she's not calling for bans, but rather for common sense human control. Gun control.
Well, the whole point is to pass common sense regulation, robust gun control regulations that, let's say, for instance, you have background checks without the loopholes, the gun show loophole, the loophole that gives the FBI a maximum of 3 days to conduct a background check. There's a loophole when it comes to private sellers. Again, the point is common sense regulation. Banning things does create a black market.
By the way, part of Anna's common sense gun regulation includes banning so-called assault-style rifles. So while she's saying she's against banning and that banning doesn't work and that banning opens opportunities in the black market, she's still for banning. Because another key characteristic of a control freak is that they're hypocrites. And this background check waiting period nonsense that Anna and her cohorts want to foist on people constitutes very real, very dangerous infringements that keep people who really need a gun from owning that life-saving device. Can you even think of anything more evil than to keep someone from protecting themselves?
And in this case, the fact that Trump is so quick to go toward banning something, which, by the way, 6 people have died, all of them have been adults, and they purchased the products on the street, which means that we need better regulation, but banning it isn't going to solve the problem.
That's the only thing she said that was true. But that doesn't redeem Kasparian, nor does it clean off the sewage she decides to swim in every day with the Young Turks. She's an evil actor with a large influence on the stage of history with the same objectives as the Communist News Network's Chris Cuomo. Control freaks can never be good players in the game of life.
All right, so let's just stick with the through thread here, Steve. Obviously, part of the momentum here is people are concerned. People are concerned, sure. And the president's picking up on that. He's got a great gut for sentimentality. So why doesn't he follow it through with you got 90% of people who say all sales should be checked when it comes to weapons, right, and who say we need red flag laws. If you have a reasonable, you got to have due process. But if you have a reasonable suspicion that someone is in a bad way, you should remove their access and remove their weapons for a while. That has huge consensus in this country, too. Why not follow the thinking through and pass those as well?
And there's your push for the extreme risk protection orders or red flag laws. If I didn't know any better, I'd say mainstream media teleprompter readers were salesmen for some unseen elite force that's trying to weaken and create a victim class in America. Nah, maybe I'm just overthinking it.
Right. No, and it does as long as there's due process. But
so Steve also let you know that he's against the Constitution by agreeing that we should have red flag, Second and Fourth Amendment trampling laws as long as there's due process. Bunch of sellouts.
But here's the problem, I think, with trying to draw the parallel here, Chris, between vaping and guns. I'm no constitutional law scholar, but when I read the Bill of Rights, I don't find vaping anywhere in there. But right after the very sacred First Amendment is the equally sacred Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. So we're talking about a constitutional right versus a cigarette, basically.
But it is not an absolute
no parallel.
right. It's not an
right.
absolute.
We do have constitutional rights. But I do want to note that.
I hear people say this all the time. No right is absolute. Of course rights are absolute, or they wouldn't be rights. You absolutely have the right to do anything that you want to do and own anything that you want to own for your own personal protection, as long as you don't trample on the rights of others. In other words, what you don't have the right to do is infringe on the rights of others. Period. It's as easy as that.
For some reason, we keep forgetting the second part of that constitutional protection, which means you need gun control, well-regulated militia. Right. I don't think that the situation we have in place right now is a well-regulated militia. There needs to be, every single constitutional right has its limitations. And in this case, for some reason, while we have even limitations on the First Amendment, we have a party in this country, the Republican Party, who refuses to acknowledge that there are meant to be limitations in the Second Amendment. Well-regulated militia. Let's repeat it again.
First of all, to that point,
well-regulated militia.
If you're going to keep repeating that, you have to know what it means. And you have to know the history and the context there. And no, I don't think you do, because a well-regulated militia meant at that time of the writing of the Constitution, it was any male who was healthy was considered a member of the militia. So every citizen is part of the militia by the definition.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm talking about the well-regulated part. Well-regulated.
I'm a militiaman in that regard. And we also know from the other writings outside...
I'm not questioning the militia part of it. I am talking about the regulation part of the Constitution that for some reason everyone seems to forget.
No, hold on. And that's my second point that I'm going to get to here is, no, we're not forgetting about that. For example, machine guns have been illegal in this country for 100 years.
That is absolutely not the intent of well-regulated. Well-regulated does not mean controlled by a federal power. In fact, the Bill of Rights was specifically penned to recognize the power of the individual, not sanction power for some centralized authority. These examples of the usage of well-regulated are taken from the Oxford English Dictionary. The phrase well-regulated was in common usage long before 1789 and remained that way for a century thereafter. It referred to the property of something being in proper working order. Something that was well-regulated was calibrated correctly and functioning as expected. Establishing government oversight of people's arms or well-regulating them was not only not the intent in using the phrase in the Second Amendment, it was precisely to render the government powerless to do so. That was and is the intent of the Second Amendment. For anybody to come along and say well-regulated means government needs to move in on your life, liberty, property, and pursuit of happiness is to be dishonest with the intent. A well-regulated militia is a properly functioning, correctly working, and capable militia. A militia that has the objective of and is necessary for the protection and the security of a free, not controlled state. Yeah, the word free is in the Second Amendment, Anna, and freedom is the opposite of controlled or regulated. But we're not just talking about freedom for the individual states that make up America, but also the broader state of freedom for the individual. There's more to this CNN video, but I'm going to stop right here. If you want me to break it down more, let me know in the comments section below. Don't forget, liking and sharing this video helps combat YouTube censorship. I'll see you guys in the next video. If you guys enjoy these videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification icon, give it a thumbs up, and share it with everybody you know. Also, check out over 100 hard-hitting designs in the shirt store, and if you want to support more content, hit me up on Patreon or PayPal. All those links will be in the description and in the pinned comment. I'll see you guys in the next heavily censored shadow ban video.